Hi guys, welcome back. I thought I'd do kind of a part two to one of the audio clips that I put up a couple days ago. I think it was called What the Hell's Going On? And it was primarily thinking about, why are we having all of these symptoms and what's causing that? And the focus of that ended up being, especially the latter half of it, ended up being primarily on the mental symptoms, especially if you're experiencing a lot of fear and dread and anxiety and terror. Um, and you're kind of always feeling like your fight, flight, or freeze system is just always activated, or is so sensitive that the slightest thing can kind of send it off. So I spent a lot of time in that audio clip describing that piece of it. So if that's kind of your primary symptom, I'd go back to that and listen to it again. If I can answer any other questions, I will. Remember, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a biochemist. This is just kind of what I've come to understand in terms of what's going on with us during in the research I've done and what I've read and what I've looked into, and a few things that maybe I had picked up along the way in my career prior to being injured. But today I want to go back to the metaphor that I kind of spoke about in that video, which is our body as a soup. So I imagine our body is this big pot of soup on the stove, and it's got all kinds of things in it: neurotransmitters, our hormones, our bones, our blood, our tissues, our organs, all of this stuff mixed together. And we'd like to believe that each of these things are discrete entities, but they're not. They create a soup. And so, for example, what I used in that video was the idea that when I put my Xanax in, I needed that Xanax, or I was told I needed that Xanax, and then that Xanax was no longer working for me anymore. I wanted to reach in and pull it out. Well, we know that we can't, just like we can't reach into that pot of soup and take out soup and take out salt that we've added to our soup, right? We can't add salt, reach in, take it out. It's now intermingled with everything else. So we're using that same metaphor for this video. And I want to go back to two of the main neurotransmitters that I was talking about. We have several that we're all familiar with, but the two that I want to speak to the most today have to do with GABA and glutamate. And GABA is our primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. It slows things down. It's the brakes, okay? And glutamate is the opposite. It's the excitatory neurotransmitter. It's the gas, okay? It keeps things kind of frenetic and moving. And the other thing I mentioned in that video, that again, go back and listen to that one first, because I think it'll answer some of these questions. But when we take away the benzodiazepine that we're on, or while we're on it, we go into tolerance withdrawal, which basically means we need more of that drug now to get the same effect, or we've built up a tolerance to it, so a milligram no longer is doing the trick. We now need 1.5 milligrams. Okay, so when that happens, or when you're actually trying to take the drug away and take it out of your system and withdraw from it, taper from it, or you're cold turkey or whatever, it's not that there's not enough GABA in our system. That is not the problem. That's the theory that I kind of buy into the most, anyways. That's not the problem. So the problem is that it's like a lock and a key. So you have these receptors all over your body that the GABA has to bind to in order for it to do its function. Well, over time, having put a benzo in our system, whether it's for a week or a month or a year or 10 years or whatever it is, it's different for each person, that we have enough of the key, which is the GABA, but the lock, the receptor that the key has to go into, has been altered. And until that receptor has had enough time to upregulate, readjust, readapt, all these things, we have a lot of floating GABA with no place for it to go. Okay, so it's not, oh my God, let me load up with GABA supplements and things. Okay, so again, I mentioned that earlier, but I want to reiterate that. And I want to reiterate that because what is out of balance is that GABA glutamate mechanism. Okay, so it's out of balance not because we don't have enough GABA, let's boost up the GABA. No, it's out of balance because the GABA that we have in our system can't bind to the right receptors. So, it can also be seen, it can be misunderstood that we have too much glutamate. So, for example, I've had people in this process say, hey, maybe we need to stick you on like a Namenda or those type of Alzheimer's drugs that they're like glutamate sponges. They suck up extra glutamate. Well, the problem isn't that I'm making extra glutamate, and that's why my body is so frenetic and excitatory. It's because I don't have the balancing agent of the GABA, right, to create that homeostasis. Okay, so this is very, very important. because it's an important distinction. So a couple things are happening as we get symptomatic. So first of all, let's go back to glutamate for a second. When somebody has extra glutamate or excess glutamate production in their body, a lot of times this can be associated with things like Parkinson's disease, MS, Lou Gehrig's, which is ALS. It can be associated with OCD, with depression, with schizophrenia, with kind of autism spectrum disorders. I'm trying to think if I'm listing anything else. Alzheimer's disease. And so as we're getting symptomatic in our withdrawal, it is not uncommon that people go and get tested for MS. They want to understand if they have they feel like they might have ALS. They feel cognitively impacted. And there are some studies linking benzodiazepine use with dementia. But I'm just thinking about the symptoms as we're going through this and why we might feel all these things. It's not, again, because all of a sudden we have some, glutamate storm because we're producing extra glutamate. No, it's because that other balancing agent that we need in our body to create the homeostasis, the GABA, is not able to get to its receptors for a period of time while we're healing. Okay, so because of that, we're out of balance with what feels like extra glutamate, but it's not. It's kind of like making a vodka tonic and saying, okay, 1 part vodka, 3 parts tonic. Oops, well, I only have, enough for 1 part tonic. So when you drink that drink, you think, oh my God, this tastes so much like alcohol. This has more alcohol in it than anything else. No, it has no more alcohol in it. It just doesn't have the other balancing agent out, right? That can help kind of dilute it. And that's what's happening in that balance between GABA and glutamate. So again, with glutamate being kind of in hyperdrive without the balancing agent, we can feel symptoms that look like OCD, depression, schizophrenia, MS, ALS. I've known of people that have gotten kind of partial diagnoses of things like, we think you have MS, we think you have this, you might have beginning stages of Alzheimer's, you have OCD-like symptoms, you're depressed. So that's part of it. The other piece that I mentioned in my last audio clip was around, again, we have these GABA receptors all over our body, right? So they're not working very well, which is why all kinds of things can go wrong. And I mentioned that we have a high concentration of them in our gut, and we have a lot of gastrointestinal problems as a result of this. Many of us do, not everybody. It affects everyone different. What's also important to know is you've probably heard of the neurotransmitter serotonin. It's obviously widely known because it's probably the most widely known, right, in some ways because of all of the antidepressants and things that target it to make us feel less anxious and have our mood elevate or balance out. Well, over 90% of our serotonin is actually made in our gut. We tend to think about it as a brain neurotransmitter. It's all over, but 90% of the production of serotonin is actually happening in our gut, which highly affects our mood, right? It's going to certainly highly affect our GI tract, but it highly affects our mood. So we wonder, like, why am I, so depressed in this? Why am I so anxious in this? Well, there's the limbic system injury that I talked about in the last video, and there's also the fact that we've got this gut potentially that is highly compromised as a result of these medications. And because 90% of our actually not more than 90% of our serotonin is being generated in the gut, then our mood is kind of all over the place as a result of that. Another interesting thing that happens in benzo withdrawal and in benzo use is obviously the endocrine system is highly influenced, the pituitary, the adrenals, the thyroid. Those systems, as you know, affect all kinds of things from mood to skin to sleep to temperature, all of that. And another system that is highly affected are our hormones. And so if you've ever listened to Geraldine Burns' podcast, it's great. If you haven't looked at it, please. It's called Benzodiazepine Awareness. You can Google it and pull her up. But part of her story, and many people that actually she has on her show, talk about having had hysterectomies because they get their periods for 2 or 3 months, or 2 or 3 weeks at a time, or the flow is so heavy, or just terrible pain, or whatever, all these hormonal difficulties that come with this. And so that whole system can get very much thrown off. And a lot of times what happens is and I've seen this time and time again, is we end up being put on hormones. And so, for example, I'm 51, I'm in perimenopause. My OBGYN would most likely want me on some probably type of maybe some bioidentical hormones, or a little bit of progesterone and a little bit of estrogen. But here's another kind of fun fact that throws a big monkey wrench into what we're dealing with, is that, let's just take progesterone. It's a neurosteroid, right? We tend to think about it as just related to kind of our menstrual cycles or whatever. But the reality is that progesterone is a neurosteroid, and it also affects the GABA receptors. It tends to be more calm. It helps us sleep. At that point in the cycle where it's kind of most elevated, it's where we tend to be calmer. We tend to be sleeping a little bit better. Our skin kind of looks pretty good. But what I've seen time and time again are women are being put on progesterone supplements, supplementation, and then find that this throws them into the same set of symptoms as benzo withdrawal. I don't think, though, that it necessarily binds to that same receptor, but it affects the GABA receptors. So anything that's going to kind of hit that GABA receptor when you're highly sensitized already and struggling, potentially is going to be a problem for you. Okay, and so progesterone, ironically, is one of those known offenders. So here we are, like, I'm in perimenopause, I'm in benzo withdrawal. You'd think, throw some progesterone at me, calm me down. But the reality is that for most people, it actually can cause even worse symptoms. So my takeaway point in all this, I want to wrap this up and be brief, is that when people are saying, oh my gosh, my cardiovascular system is affected. Well, why is that? Well, part of it is that GABA interacts with norepinephrine, which affects our blood pressure, which affects our heart rate. I've already mentioned several times all the effects it has on our gastrointestinal tract. Well, our gastrointestinal tract is also highly influenced, right? And highly influences our mood, in part because the majority of our serotonin is being, is produced there and exists there. You've heard more and more lately about good gut health leading to good brain health, leading to good mental health, right? I mean, all of these, again, this is my idea of the soup. We're not, we're not 4,000 discrete, I'm an eye, I'm an ear, I'm a pancreas, I'm a uterus, all of this stuff works together, and we have to be aware of that when we're putting things in our body, and especially potent things such as benzodiazepines. And that's why I want you listening to the podcasts that are out there. Look at Geraldine's podcast. There's several others, and I will do a podcast where I kind of just talk about resources. And in the book that I've written that'll come out in May, I have a list at the back of my book of various podcasts, various YouTube videos, various articles and books and things that I think would be helpful in trying to understand. But if we can kind of break it down as simplistically as we can, we are out of balance. And there's a million things going on, but the two main things the takeaway point is, if you just took our main two neurotransmitters of GABA and glutamate and know that they are out of balance, and know that excess glutamate, which we don't have, we just are out of balance, but excess glutamate can cause these things, are known to link to these things in people. So it would make sense we'd have those symptoms since, we're out of balance and we don't have enough brakes for our gas. And then what happens when, what are the repercussions of not having enough brakes? What are we not being able to do there in terms of the intermingling with these other neurotransmitters, and what it causes in our endocrine system, our gut, our heart, our skin, all of our sensory organs. So I hope this was helpful. Again, I will continue to try to keep circling back as people ask questions, because I'd like this to get more clear rather than less clear, and I don't know if I'm doing a good enough job making it as clear as I am thinking. I don't know that it's coming out quite as articulate as it exists in my mind, but I'll keep making my best attempts at that. The takeaway point is, of course, we're going to feel terrible, many of us, as our nervous systems have become sensitized as a result of this, and all of our systems are intertwined, right? You can't have a compromised nervous system with all the intricacies of that and think that the rest of our body is going to, chug along and not feel it. It doesn't mean we have a heart condition and we have dementia, or we have interstitial cystitis with our bladder. It doesn't mean all that, but it does mean that we could have all kinds of whack-a-mole symptoms and all of these various symptoms, and it can be maddening as we rush off to specialists, right? But then again, the specialist is looking at us as a uterus, or as an ear, as an eye, as a heart, as a stomach, and it doesn't work that way. And my hope is that we can, keep also educating and finding ways to um, let this be better understood just in the medical community as well, because there's so many people on these benzodiazepines, and I'll get into that in another post, just the sheer numbers. Um, we're rushing off to specialists left and right, and there's not really kind of a generalized approach of saying, okay, wait a second, here's the soup, you stuck in the salt, we can't take the salt out without disrupting all these systems, and that makes sense, and we can kind of normalize that, and maybe also reduce some of our fear and health anxiety that we get because everything feels so um, up in the air and scary and affected. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it.